This is Dr. Mohammed. So today we are going to discuss regarding synthesis and flow of CSF, hydrocephalus and its management. So cerebrospinal fluid is the fluid which bathes the external internal surfaces of the brain. It serves its most important function as far as head injury and neurosurgery is concerned. It serves as a cushion between CNS and surrounding bone. It also serves as a reservoir and assists in regulation of contents of the skull. And it plays an active part in the nourishment of the nervous tissue, and also assists in removal of products of neuronal metabolism. So these are the common functions of the cerebrospinal fluid. It serves as the cushion between CNS and surrounding bone. It serves as a reservoir for regulation of the contents of the skull, and it plays active part in nourishment of the nervous tissue, and it assists in removal of products of neuronal metabolism. So everybody knows that it is a clear colorless fluid, and glucose is about half that of blood. This has got very important clinical application. Glucose is about half that of the blood, which means that when you are going to do the lumbar puncture, when you are doing your clinical work, and you have to do a lumbar puncture, for example, in a case of tuberculous meningitis, in that case, when you do the lumbar puncture, at the same time you have to draw the blood, so that you should be knowing what is the glucose concentration in the blood at that time, at the time of lumbar puncture. There are only few traces of protein, and few cells are present in these, and these are lymphocytes. The normal volume of cerebrospinal fluid is 150 ml, out of which 120 ml is in the cranial cavity, and the remaining is in the spinal subarachnoid space. The rate of formation of the CSF is 500 ml per day, which comes out to be 20 ml per hour, or 1 ml every 3 minutes. And it is exchanged 3 times in 24 hours. So about the composition and volume. So there is variable composition and volume if according to the age of the patient. Like for example, in the newborn, the WBCs, the normal white cell count should be less than 10, whereas in adults it should be less than 5. RBCs are usually 0 mil, okay, and protein again in adults it is about 30 or 40 milligram per deciliter, whereas in newborns and preemies, like the proteins are towards the higher side, and it is 150 milligram, around 150 milligram per deciliter. And regarding glucose, it's almost the same, and the ratio of the glucose that I have told you and CSF in plasma is half that of the blood. The total volume of CSF again varies according to the age of the patient. In newborn, it is 5 ml. It is 5 ml. You know that in the newborn, if we see the CT scan, the brain is very tight and ventricles are very small. So CSF volume is about 5 ml in total. Whereas in adults, it is 150 ml. 150 ml, okay? And formation of CSF is again 25 ml per day in newborn and 450 to 750 ml per day in adults. And the pressure of CSF is in adults is about 7 to 15 centimeter of water. This is the normal pressure of the CSF, 7 to 15 ml of centimeter of water, 7 to 15 centimeter of water. How it is formed? It is formed mainly from the choroid plexus, and some majority of it is formed from the choroid plexus. Some of it originate from the ependymal cells and from the brain surface through the perivascular spaces. It passes from the lateral ventricles into the third ventricle through the foramen of Monro, and it then passes into the fourth ventricle through the cerebral aqueduct. So third ventricle is connected with the fourth ventricle by means of cerebral aqueduct. And from the fourth ventricle, everybody knows that it passes in, it comes into the subarachnoid spaces over the surface of the brain through the foramen of Magendie and foramen of Luschka. The main sites for absorption of CSF are the arachnoid villi that projects into the dural venous sinuses. Arachnoid villi are grouped together to form arachnoid granulations. This is the basic anatomy. Just we are reviewing this to go on to the hydrocephalus, which is the main topic. This is the pictorial representation of this arachnoid villi, choroid plexus, and we know that the secretory epithelium is cuboidal epithelium. Secretory epithelium is the cuboidal epithelium. And this is the picture of arachnoid granulation, and this is going into straight into the venous sinuses. And this is the subarachnoid space. From here, the CSF is absorbed into the arachnoid granulation villi and into the venous sinuses. It drains into the venous sinuses. This is the normal flow of CSF. This is the lateral ventricle, body of the lateral ventricle. This is the third ventricle. This one is the cerebral aqueduct, which connects this third ventricle by means of cerebral aqueduct into the fourth ventricle. So third ventricle is connected through the cerebral aqueduct into the fourth ventricle. And from the fourth ventricle, the CSF goes through the foramen of Magendie and Luschka, and it comes into the subarachnoid spaces over the surface of the brain, and some of the CSF goes into the spinal canal. So coming on to the main topic, after this basic discussion on cerebrospinal fluid. So hydrocephalus is defined as the accumulation of increased volume of CSF in the ventricular system. And it can be classified as communicating and non-communicating. And communicating type of hydrocephalus is also known as non-obstructive type, in which the CSF circulation is blocked at the level of arachnoid granulation. So if the CSF is going through the fourth ventricle into the foramen of Magendie and Luschka, and it comes onto the overlying surface of the brain, and the block is at the level of the arachnoid granulation, in that case it is known as communicating hydrocephalus or non-obstructive. Whereas non-communicating and obstructive type is that in which the CSF circulation is blocked proximal to the arachnoid granulation, which means that the block might be at the level of foramen of Monro, block might be at the level of cerebral aqueduct or the fourth ventricle. So these are the two types, communicating and non-communicating, or you can also call it non-obstructive and obstructive type. These are the common CT. This is very important if you want to learn the CT scan to pick up the hydrocephalus. These are the very important points, and you will go on one by one, and I will show you the pictures as well. So how do you pick the CT and MRI, hydrocephalus on the basis of CT scan and MRI? Okay, so the size of both temporal horn is greater than 2 millimeter in width. Tariq Saab? The size of both temporal horn is greater than 2 millimeter in width.
जी सर.
तो वो मैंने वीडियो ऑफ की है, ठीक है ना? हेलो तारिक साहब,
जी सर.
मैंने अपनी वीडियो ऑफ की, बाकी तो चल रही है ना, कंटिन्यू है ना?
जी जी सर, कंटिन्यू.
ठीक. So the size of both temporal horn is greater than 2 millimeter in width. So I'll show you the picture. So this is the just a drawing of the CT scan. I will show you it to you in actual CT scans as well. So just to give you the idea, so these are the temporal horns. So if the width of this temporal horn on the CT scan, there is a scale on the CT scan given over here in actual CT scan films. So if this is more than 2 millimeter in width, normally these temporal horns are not visible. But if it is visible and if it is more than 2 millimeter in width, then you will label it as hydrocephalus. So this is one of the criteria to pick up the hydrocephalus on CT scan and MRI. So this is the first point, that the width of the temporal horn will be more than 2 millimeter. So the second point, frontal horn diameter to internal diameter of the ventricles. So again, to clear this point, how do you calculate this ratio? Again, going to that picture. On the basis of the scale given on the CT scan here, you will measure this distance. You will measure this distance, frontal horn, and you will keep it as numerator. And at the same level, you will measure this distance from internal surface of the bone to this internal surface of the bone at the same level. This is ID, okay, internal diameter. And so you will keep the frontal horn diameter as a numerator and the other measurement as a denominator. And if this ratio is greater than 0.5, then you will label it as hydrocephalus. The third point is ballooning of the lateral horns of the ventricles, which is also known as Mickey Mouse appearance. This is an easy point to understand, and I will show it to you. This, can you see this picture? This is more similar to just, I told you that Mickey Mouse appearance. If normally the ventricles are like this, normally the ventricles are like this, very small. And if it appears like this, like Mickey Mouse appearance, you will label it as hydrocephalus. So we have discussed 3 points: the size of the temporal horn, which should be greater than 2 millimeter. The other measurement is, other ratio is frontal horn diameter and internal diameter at the same level, and you divide it. If the ratio is more than 0.5, it is known as it is labeled as hydrocephalus. And the third point is ballooning of lateral horn of ventricles, which is also known as Mickey Mouse appearance. And the fourth point is ballooning of the third ventricle. I will show it to you. Other point is, to pick up the hydrocephalus on the CT scan is transependymal absorption on CT, which is also known as periventricular lucency or periventricular low density. So I will show you the picture of that. If you see, these are the ventricles, dilated ventricles. Normally this periventricular lucency is not there. If this periventricular lucency is there, it shows that there is high pressure within the ventricular system and there is hydrocephalus occurring. So what will happen? that there will be transependymal absorption of the CSF, which will give you this periventricular lucency. Here you can also see a little bit of this periventricular lucency. This one, okay? So going back, so we have discussed 4 points. Other important ratio is Evans ratio. Evans ratio is just similar to this ratio. There is a little difference in Evans ratio and this ratio, is that in this you measure the frontal horn diameter like this, you keep it as numerator, and you measure the maximal biparietal diameter. How do you measure it? Maximal biparietal diameter from here to here. This area. This is maximal biparietal diameter. And the other part of the ratio is frontal horn diameter. So coming back, so Evans ratio is you measure the frontal horn diameter, you keep it as numerator, and the maximal biparietal diameter as denominator. And if the ratio is greater than 30%, or if the ratio is greater than, you can say 0.3, then you will label it as hydrocephalus. The other important point is sagittal MRI shows upward bowing of the corpus callosum. Sagittal MRI shows upward bowing of the corpus callosum. How do you pick that? On sagittal MRI, this is the sagittal view of the MRI, and this is the corpus callosum. And if there is hydrocephalus, there will be upward bowing of the corpus callosum. So in the olden times, when there was no MRI, people used to pick up the hydrocephalus by doing the angiography. And if there is upward bowing of the, and this anterior cerebral artery is run over here. So on that conventional angiography in the olden times, if there is upward bowing of the anterior cerebral arteries, they will label it as hydrocephalus, because there were no CT scan or MRI. Initially, there was conventional angiography. So these are the common CT and MRI criteria to pick up the hydrocephalus. The size of temporal horn should be greater than 2 mm. Frontal horn to internal diameter ratio should be greater than 0.5. Mickey Mouse appearance, ballooning of third ventricle, I will show it to you. Periventricular lucency, you will see on other pictures as well. Evans ratio, in which there is frontal horn is as numerator and maximal parietal diameter is as denominator, and if the ratio is greater than 0.5 or 30%, you will label it as hydrocephalus. And sagittal MRI shows upward bowing of the corpus callosum. I have already shown you the picture of that. So this is again the same thing. To understand the hydrocephalus, you should have a basic concept of this normal ventricles. So normally ventricles are like this. Frontal horn are pointed. And if it is Mickey Mouse appearance, you will label it as hydrocephalus. This is third ventricle. It's slit like. If it is ballooned up, I will show it to you in next coming pictures. If the third ventricle is ballooned up, you will say it as hydrocephalus. Okay. And if there is periventricular lucency, there is no periventricular lucency. So this is normal ventricles. These are the normal ventricles. One important thing that I want to
सर हेलो सर अनम्यूट कर लीजिए सर अपने हेलो
अनम्यूट कर लिया मैंने.
ओके सर, ठीक है सर, आवाज
क्या
आ रही है।
इतनी देर से अनम्यूट चल रहा था
नहीं
क्या?
नहीं सर, असल में बीच में से आवाजें आ रही थी, तो मैंने तकरीबन सारे पार्टिसिपेंट को, ऑल पार्टिसिपेंट्स को जो है वो म्यूट किया। फिर मैंने आपको कहा कि जो है सर आप अनम्यूट कर लीजिए।
अच्छा,
जी सर।
कंटिन्यू करें क्या?
जी सर, कंटिन्यू करें।
Okay, so on the CT scan, normal CT scan, you will see the ventricles like this: pointed frontal horn, slit-like third ventricle, occipital horns. This is very important cut or slice of the CT scan. If you understand this basic, this is smile shape system. This is the basal system, just like the smile of a cartoon. This is known as quadrigeminal system. What is the importance of this? I will tell you. This is quadrigeminal system, and this is the Sylvian fissure, which is the junction of the frontal and temporal lobe. These are the common pools of the CSF, which you can appreciate if there is no hydrocephalus or if there is no signs of raised ICP on the CT scan. If there is raised intracranial pressure, or if there is very tight brain, these all will be obliterated. The basal systems, the Sylvian fissure. To understand the concept, this is the quadrigeminal system. I'm again telling you, this is quadrigeminal system, and this is the pons. In front of the pons, there is another important system, the pool of CSF, which is known as prepontine system, and roughly it is star-shaped. It is star-shaped, and you can understand the concept of this star-shaped pool of CSF from this picture. This is the case of subarachnoid hemorrhage, in which there is blood is pooled into the basal cisterns. So this is the prepontine cistern, star-shaped prepontine cistern. So all these cisterns and Sylvian fissure and the sulci that you can appreciate on normal CT scans like this. These all obliterated, these are all obliterated if there is raised intracranial pressure or if there is hydrocephalus. So in case of hydrocephalus or raised intracranial pressure, the ventricles will be obliterated, the sulci will be obliterated, the Sylvian fissure will be obliterated, like this Sylvian fissure. This is the Sylvian fissure, and these basal cisterns will be obliterated. If these are obliterated, it means that the patient is having very high intracranial pressure. Okay. And you will understand the concept of this, all these CT scan findings in the next few slides. So what is the etiology of the hydrocephalus? So hydrocephalus is either due to the subnormal CSF reabsorption or rarely to CSF overproduction. So hydrocephalus is either due to subnormal CSF reabsorption or rarely due to CSF overproduction. The common causes of the hydrocephalus are congenital, like Chiari type 1 and type 2 malformation. Chiari malformation is the descent of cerebellar tonsils. We don't want to go into the details of that. Another reason for hydrocephalus is aqueductal gliosis, in which there is a gliosis in the aqueduct, cerebral aqueduct. Or another cause of the hydrocephalus is secondary aqueductal gliosis due to intrauterine infection. The other congenital cause of hydrocephalus is Dandy-Walker malformation, which is also known as atresia of the foramen of Luschka and Mejingli. And in this, there is large pool of CSF in the posterior fossa. So these are the CT scans of aqueductal stenosis and Dandy-Walker malformation, two of the causes of congenital causes of hydrocephalus. So if you see that this is the lateral ventricle, body of lateral ventricle, causing upward bowing of the corpus callosum. This is the third ventricle. This all is the third ventricle. Third ventricle communicates with the fourth ventricle by means of cerebral aqueduct. But here you can see there, you cannot see the cerebral aqueduct. So there is aqueductal stenosis. There is aqueductal stenosis. And on the CT scan, what happens in the aqueductal, what will you pick in the CT scan in cases of aqueductal stenosis? That the fourth ventricle will be very small. Fourth ventricle on the MRI is very small. If this was communicating hydrocephalus, for example, the CSF is going through over here, the fourth ventricle will also be dilated. But here the fourth ventricle is small, which means that there is aqueductal stenosis. The line of aqueduct is this one. Okay, and this is the Dandy-Walker malformation. In case of Dandy-Walker malformation, what happens is that there is obstruction of the foramen of Legendi and Luschka, which is congenital, and the posterior fossa contents are smaller, and there is large pool of CSF. This is known as Dandy-Walker malformation. These are the two of the causes of congenital causes of hydrocephalus. So, as far as etiology is concerned, there are two reasons for the development of hydrocephalus. Congenital, we have discussed. Congenital could be aqueductal stenosis, Dandy-Walker malformation, and cerebral aqueductal gliosis. Okay. As far as acquired etiology of the hydrocephalus is concerned, it could be due to infections like post-meningitis, cysticercosis, post-hemorrhagic like subarachnoid hemorrhage, or intraventricular hemorrhage. Other cause of hydrocephalus is the obstructive hydrocephalus is secondary to the masses like vascular malformation or neoplastic, in case of neoplastic colloid cyst, medulloblastoma, and suprasellar pituitary tumors. These are the causes of obstructive hydrocephalus: colloid cyst, medulloblastoma, and suprasellar pituitary tumor. So acquired causes could be due to the meningitis, due to the tumors, and hemorrhages. Okay. So this is one of the scan of post-meningitic hydrocephalus. You can see Mickey Mouse appearance. Now we will be seeing the pictures of the hydrocephalus. This is Mickey Mouse appearance. This whole frontal horns are dilated. Third ventricle is ballooned. Okay, like the nose of Mickey Mouse. And this is periventricular lucency. Another point to diagnose the hydrocephalus. And this is dilated temporal horn. Another point to pick up the hydrocephalus. This is the dilated fourth ventricle. So fourth ventricle is dilated, temporal horn is dilated, third ventricle has ballooned up, frontal horn is giving Mickey Mouse appearance, and there is periventricular lucency. So this is the way you pick up the hydrocephalus on the CT scan. This is the cisterna magna, forget about it. This is very, not for your level. This is cisterna magna, okay? So next slide, the cause of hydrocephalus is subarachnoid hemorrhage. This subarachnoid hemorrhage, this is in the Sylvian fissure. I showed you in the previous scans. The Sylvian fissure is the junction of the frontal and temporal lobe, and this is another pool of CSF. So this pool of CSF is filled with blood. So this subarachnoid hemorrhage is leading to the hydrocephalus. Again, you can see the Mickey Mouse appearance and dilated temporal horns. Here, you cannot see the periventricular lucency that markedly as it was on the previous scan. The reason is that this is very acute hydrocephalus. The periventricular lucency develops slowly. So this is hydrocephalus secondary to the subarachnoid hemorrhage, and you can see the blood in the basal cistern as well. This is the quadrigeminal cistern. I told you in the previous slide. This is another cause of hydrocephalus. This is intraventricular bleed in the tumor, which is giving rise to the dilated ventricles. So this is intraventricular bleed in the tumor, which is causing obstructive hydrocephalus. You can see the ventricles, a little bit of frontal horns, but the most of the part is obliterated because of the tumor and the blood. And these are the occipital horns. Another reason for hydrocephalus etiologies we have discussed in this previous slide is the colloid cyst. Colloid cyst lies in the third ventricle. So it is giving rise to the Mickey Mouse appearance of the frontal horns. So to understand the concept of intracranial pressure in the radiology, you can see these scans. If you compare these scans, this is the preoperative scan of colloid cyst. You can see dilated ventricles, you can see the periventricular lucency, but you cannot appreciate the sulci over here. All the sulci are obliterated completely, which means that the brain is very tight. So all the sulci are obliterated. And this is the post-op scan of the same patient. Once we have removed by this craniotomy, this is the craniotomy defect. By this craniotomy, we have removed this colloid cyst. So the ventricles have started to come down. The ventricles will come down slowly. It will not come down immediately. So slowly the scan is getting better. If you see over here, you cannot appreciate the sulci over here. Whereas post-operatively, you can see the sulci over here. So the brain is getting relaxed. This is another sign of relaxed brain. You can appreciate these sulci over here. You can see these sulci. You can see these sulci. Whereas in this, no sulci were visible and the brain was very tight. The ventricles will come down slowly within few days. This is another reason for the hydrocephalus, obstructive hydrocephalus, in which there is a large tumor in the posterior fossa. There is a large tumor in the posterior fossa and it is causing obliteration of the fourth ventricle. Fourth ventricle lies over here. It's over here. So it is causing obstruction of the fourth ventricle. And how do you pick up the hydrocephalus? Only in this slice. You do not have the other slices, for example, and you have got only one slice. You can see these are the temporal horns, very large temporal horns. In the normal scan, the temporal horns are barely visible. And this is the ballooning of the third ventricle, which was slit-like. In the normal scan, it was slit-like. We will go on to the normal scan again to see the difference. So this third ventricle is ballooned up and temporal horns are dilated markedly. This again, another CT scan of posterior fossa tumor causing obstructive hydrocephalus. There is Mickey Mouse appearance. This is the Mickey Mouse appearance. This is periventricular lucency, dilated temporal horns, ballooning of third ventricle. So these are the signs of hydrocephalus. This is how you pick the hydrocephalus on the CT scan. Another picture to show you the hydrocephalus of posterior fossa tumors. Posterior fossa tumor causing obstruction of the fourth ventricle and giving rise to Mickey Mouse appearance, periventricular lucency. So there is hydrocephalus. In this scan, you can see the large posterior fossa tumor, but the ventricles are not dilated. This scan is, I have showed you this scan to see the comparison. The posterior fossa is filled with large tumor, but there is no hydrocephalus. The reason is that this is the post-operative scan of patient with ventriculoperitoneal shunt. The ventriculoperitoneal shunt, you can appreciate this ventriculoperitoneal shunt in the ventricular system. So the ventricles have come down in the same patient, okay? So this is the normal ventricle. Pointed frontal horns, slit-like third ventricle, no ballooning, no periventricular lucency. Sulci can be appreciated very well. So this is the comparison of this scan with this one to show you that after the shunt, what happens to the ventricles and how it comes to become normal. This is the normal ventricular system, whereas this one is the hydrocephalus. This one is after post of VP shunt. This is another picture to show you the reason for another reason for hydrocephalus, obstructive hydrocephalus is hydrocephalus due to oversecretion, which is known as choroid plexus papilloma. This hydrocephalus is not due to the obstruction. This hydrocephalus is due to the oversecretion of the CSF, which is leading to the asymmetrical dilatation of the ventricular system. There is asymmetrical dilatation. This is choroid plexus papilloma. So these were the etiologies of the hydrocephalus. What are the signs and symptoms of hydrocephalus? The signs and symptoms again depend on the age of the patient. In younger children, the cranium enlarges at a rate greater than facial growth. There will be irritability, poor head control, and nausea, vomiting. These are the signs of raised intracranial pressure in the younger age group, less than 1 year. The fontanelle will be full and bulging. You know that anterior fontanelle closes at the age of 18 months. So below 1 year of age, if there is hydrocephalus, the fontanelle will be full and bulging. There will be engorgement of scalp veins because of the raised intracranial pressure. You know that there are diploic veins in which there is bilateral flow. So there is engorgement of the scalp veins because of the raised intracranial pressure. Another sign, clinical sign, is McQueen sign, which is also known as crackpot sound. And in this, if you tap the skull of an infant, you will hear the sound like this. But usually after this CT scan and MRI, we do not elicit this sign commonly these days. Another sign of raised intracranial pressure and hydrocephalus in younger age group, less than 1 year, is sixth nerve palsy and sunset sign. In sunset sign, what happens? The gaze is downwards gaze, and it is because of the pressure of the CSF on the midbrain, from where the gaze pathway goes through. So there will be sunset sign. You will see the picture of this in the next few slides. There will be hyperactive reflexes, there will be apneic spells, and there will be splaying of the sutures. So these are the common signs and symptoms in age group less than 1 year. Enlargement of the cranium, irritability, nausea, vomiting, fontanelle full and bulging, engorgement of scalp veins, sixth nerve palsy, sunset sign, apneic spells, and splaying of the sutures. In older age group, the sign and symptoms slightly varies. Like if you do the fundoscopy, there will be papilledema. In younger age group, less than 1 year, you do not do the fundoscopy because they are getting compensation by means of dilatation of the sutures and bulging fontanelle. Whereas in adult age group, where the sutures have been completely fused, there are no compensatory mechanism to adapt that hydrocephalus. So there on fundoscopy, there will be papilledema. Again, there will be headache, nausea, vomiting, gait disturbances, sixth nerve palsy. In cases of chronic hydrocephalus, in case of older age group, like 5, 6 years, 7 years, there will be beaten copper appearance. I will show you the picture of this. Beaten copper appearance. There will be sutural diastasis. There will be delayed closure of the fontanelle if the age group is more than 1 year. There will be macrocrania, and there will be failure to thrive. So these are the signs and symptoms in older children and adults. Papilledema, headache, vomiting, gait disturbances, sixth nerve palsy. And these are some of the signs of chronic hydrocephalus, like beaten copper appearance on the CT scan or X-ray, sutural diastasis, delayed closure of the fontanelle, and macrocranium. So this was, I was talking about copper beaten appearance. If you see the CT scan, on the normal CT scan, the inner table of the bone is very smooth, whereas in this scan, you can see the indentation. This is because of the raised intracranial pressure, which is causing indentation of the inner table of the bone. This is known as copper beaten appearance. So copper beaten appearance, just to explain it to you, जब हम बचपन में देखते थे कि वो एक ख़ास किस्म के जो बर्तन वाले होते थे, जो तांबे के बर्तन कहलाते थे, कॉपर के, उनको वो क्या करते थे, उन बर्तन को चमकाने के लिए उसमें चोट मारते थे. उन बर्तनों में जो चोट के निशानात होते थे ना, वो दोज पर सिमिलर लाइक दिस. वो जो बर्तन का जो अंदरूनी सतह होती थी, वो इसी तरह से उसको चोट मारी जाती थी और उसको चमकाया जाता था. उसको वो कहते थे कॉपर बीटन यूटेंसिल्स. तो उसी से ये निकला है कॉपर बीटन अपीयरेंस. दिस इज नोन एज कॉपर बीटन अपीयरेंस. So how do you treat the hydrocephalus? There is medical treatment and surgical treatment. How do you treat it medically? There is a drug which is known as acetazolamide, which is carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. You can give it at the dose of 25 milligram per kg per day, and it should be given in divided doses 3 times a day. The maximum dose is 100 mg per kg per day, and this is the minimum dose, 25 mg per kg per day, and you divide it in 3 times a day. So this medicine is a temporizing measure. This is not a permanent solution for hydrocephalus. Another temporizing measure is, in certain cases, selected cases, you can do the ventricular tap or lumbar puncture. Particularly if there is hydrocephalus secondary to the intraventricular hemorrhage, you can do the lumbar puncture depending on the CT scan findings, and you drain the CSF, which is filled with blood, and once the blood stained CSF is removed, the proteins of the CSF come down, and then CSF start getting absorbed. So by this mean, doing the ventricular tap or lumbar puncture in very selected cases, not all cases. In some cases, doing the ventricular tap or lumbar puncture, like if the patient is having very high raised intracranial pressure, in that case it will be very dangerous. So in very selected cases, we do the ventricular tap or lumbar puncture. These are the temporizing measures. What are the permanent solutions? In the olden times, people used to do choroid plexectomy, because in those times the concept was that the CSF is produced only by means of choroid plexus, whereas now we know that CSF is also produced through the ependymal lining as well. So if you do the choroid plexectomy, the hydrocephalus will not resolve completely, and it is also a dangerous procedure as well. So these days, choroid plexectomy is now obsolete. Another method to treat the hydrocephalus is eliminating the obstruction. For example, if there is a colloid cyst, like I have shown you in the previous picture, you excise the colloid cyst and the hydrocephalus is resolved. The other method is, if there is posterior fossa tumor, you excise the posterior fossa tumor and the hydrocephalus will be resolved. Another surgical method is these days very commonly done after the shunts, which is known as third ventriculostomy. What do we do in third ventriculostomy? We put the endoscope in the ventricles and we make a small fenestration in the base of the third ventricle, and we communicate the cavity of the ventricles with the subarachnoid space towards the base of the skull. So this is how we do third ventriculostomy. I will show you the picture of this. The most common methods that we do these days to treat the hydrocephalus is ventriculoperitoneal shunt, ventriculoatrial shunt, or ventriculopleural shunts. These are the very common shunts. Another method is lumboperitoneal shunts. And lumboperitoneal shunts, this procedure is done in very selected cases, like normal pressure hydrocephalus, or there are some or other selected cases as well. So this is the picture of VP shunt placement. You can see the VP shunt is placed by means of this. Here the ventricular catheter is passed. It is connected by means of lower end. It goes into the peritoneal cavity. So this is how the ventriculoperitoneal shunt is performed. Ventriculoatrial shunt is performed by means of doing the same procedure, but the catheter is passed into the jugular vein, by which it goes into the right atrium. That is known as ventriculoatrial shunt. And if you pass this lower end into the chest cavity, pleural cavity, this is known as ventriculopleural shunt. You can see on the CT scan the placement of the shunt catheter, and the ventricles have completely come down. They have become slit-like. This is the scan of pre and post-op VP shunt, and again, initially the concept that I had given you regarding sulci, Sylvian fissure, periventricular lucency, basal cistern, you can compare this. This is dilated ventricle. Sulci are completely obliterated, although there is no significant periventricular lucency, but the sulci are obliterated. So this is the pre-op, before the VP shunt. This is the scan. This scan is after the VP shunt. You can see that the ventricular catheter is in place, and if the CSF is draining down, what will happen? The sulci will become more prominent. The sulci will become more prominent. You can see this is a very tight brain because of the raised intracranial pressure, and this is a very relaxed brain. And I have told you in the previous slides that to pick up the signs of raised intracranial pressure, there are 4 things: sulci, Sylvian fissure, basal cisterns that I have told you. The posterior basal cistern is the quadrigeminal cistern, which is behind the pons. The star-shaped cistern in front of the pons is prepontine cistern. So sulci, Sylvian fissure, basal cisterns, and ventricles. You look at 4 things: sulci, Sylvian fissure, basal cisterns, and the ventricles, to pick up the signs of raised intracranial pressure on the CT scan. So in this CT scan, you can see that the sulci are completely obliterated, which means that in this patient there is raised intracranial pressure because of the hydrocephalus. And once you have placed the shunt catheter, the brain has become relaxed. You can see the sulci are now opening up. What are the common complications of VP shunt? These are the very common complications of VP shunt. There are other complications as well, but the common complications are shunt infection, blocked VP shunt, and overdrainage. Sometimes what happens, if you put the ventricles catheter into the ventricular system, there is overdrainage of the ventricles. And what happens? The subdural hematoma develops. I will show you this picture on the next coming slide. So these are the common complications of the VP shunt. This is the procedure that I have told you: third ventriculostomy, endoscopic third ventriculostomy. I had told you that we pass the endoscope into the ventricular system. This is the third ventricular. We make a small fenestration here like this. This is a small fenestration in the third ventricle, and it communicates with this subarachnoid space. So rather than passing the CSF through the VP shunt catheter, the CSF is diverted like this over here into the subarachnoid space directly from here to here. So this procedure is known as third ventriculostomy. Another common type of hydrocephalus, particularly in pediatric age group, is hydranencephaly. What is the difference between hydrocephalus and hydranencephaly? Hydranencephaly is also one of the kinds of hydrocephalus, but in this what happens, that that there is negligible amount of cortical mantle on the CT scan. Negligible amount of cortex on the CT scan, and this is a post-neurulation defect. There will be total or near total absence of the cerebrum. There will be total or near total absence of the cerebrum, whereas in other hydrocephalus, the cerebral cortex can be appreciated. In this case of hydrocephalus, which is known as hydranencephaly, there will be macrocrania, huge head, mega head, and this pediatric age group, they rarely progresses beyond spontaneous vowel production and social smiling. So this pediatric age group, usually even after the VP shunt is vegetative, they remain vegetative. Although their life, you can save the life of those pediatric age group patients, but they remain vegetative. So these are the scans of the hydranencephaly. If you see the scan, there is no cortical mantle. There is very negligible cortical mantle. Very small amount of cortical mantle, and whole of the brain, the cranium is occupied by the CSF. This whole is the CSF. Here you can see the macrocrania and the sunset sign. I have told you about this sign in the previous slide. This is one of the signs of raised intracranial pressure in the pediatric age group. This is known as sunset sign, and this occurs because of the pressure of the CSF on the gaze pathway in the midbrain. So this is known as sunset sign. You can see the sunset sign. The eyeballs are looking down. This is sunset sign. So what do we do in hydranencephaly? Again, we put the VP shunt. But these patients do not respond well as far as their milestones are concerned. They remain vegetative. Another type of hydrocephalus is arrested hydrocephalus. In this kind of hydrocephalus, there is no progression or deleterious sequelae. Like in this is one of the kind of hydrocephalus in which there will be, for example, some patient had dilated ventricles, VP shunt was placed, and now VP shunt, for example, is blocked. And if you do the CT scan, the ventricles will be dilated, but patient will be having no clinical sign and symptoms of raised intracranial pressure. So in case of arrested hydrocephalus, actually what happens that arrested hydrocephalus, satisfy this criteria. It satisfies these following criteria. The ventricular size will be near normal, but it will be, a little bit normal than the normal ventricular size. The head growth will be normal. There will be continued psychomotor development, and there will be no signs of raised ICP. So by saying arrested hydrocephalus, we mean to say that the ventricles are dilated. The ventricles are dilated, but there is no periventricular lucency. You can see the sulci are, you can appreciate the sulci very well. In previous scans where the intracranial pressure was high, the ventricle was dilated, there was periventricular lucency, the sulci was obliterated. But in the case of arrested hydrocephalus, what happens that CT scan looks like hydrocephalus, but clinically the patient is very well. This is known as arrested hydrocephalus, in which the hydrocephalus has been arrested and it is not giving any clinical sign and symptoms in that particular patient. The patient will be completely normal. We will not be having any signs of raised intracranial pressure like headache, vomiting, or so and so. And if you do the fundoscopy, there will be no papillary edema. So this is dilated ventricle where you cannot see the periventricular lucency, and the sulci can be appreciated well. This is known as arrested hydrocephalus, where there are no clinical signs and symptoms. This is the last type of hydrocephalus that we are going to discuss today is normal pressure hydrocephalus. You will see in the medical wards very commonly elderly age group with dilated ventricles, where you cannot establish the diagnosis that whether these dilated ventricles are due to the degenerative changes, whether this hydrocephalus is due to the multi-infarct dilated ventricles are due to multi-infarct dementia, or this is normal pressure hydrocephalus. So normal pressure hydrocephalus in elderly age group, like greater than 60 years, you have to differentiate between atrophic dilatation of the ventricles and multi-infarct dementia. So normal pressure hydrocephalus commonly occurs at the age above 60 years. Males are more commonly affected. And in the normal pressure hydrocephalus, there is a very classical clinical triad, which is also known as Hakim's triad. This Hakim's triad comprises of the patient will be complaining of gait disturbance, dementia, and urinary incontinence. So Hakim's triad comprises of this. If these three findings are there in the age group with dilated ventricles, you will label it as normal pressure hydrocephalus, gait disturbance, dementia, and urinary incontinence. And how do we diagnose further? We do the lumbar puncture. In these cases, above 60 years of age, with these three signs, we do the lumbar puncture and we remove 15 to 30 ml of CSF. And if the patient improves as far as gait is concerned and urinary incontinence is concerned, if the gait improves and he has got urinary control, after this tapping of CSF, you will say that this patient is having normal pressure hydrocephalus and he will improve with VP shunt. And in the normal pressure hydrocephalus in the elderly age group, the CT scan again appears just like similar to the arrested hydrocephalus. But you can see a little bit of periventricular lucence, not that marked. So this is normal pressure hydrocephalus. And what happens in this normal pressure hydrocephalus? We put the VP shunt. After confirming it, first of all doing the lumbar puncture. If the patient improves, then we can say that yes, this patient will improve with VP shunt. So this is the catheter has been placed in the ventricular system. And what happens is that once the CSF is diverted, the patient got better, they get better urinary control and their gait is also improved. But sometimes a complication can occur, and this complication that I have told you in the slides of complication, over drainage. What happens is that if there is over drainage of the ventricular systems, what happens? Subdural collection of CSF or blood occurs. This is the subdural collection, you can see. This is because of the over drainage. What happens that brain has been relaxed and there is collection of the CSF. So this is one of the complications of the VP shunt, particularly in the elderly age group, which is known as over drainage of the VP shunt. Another common complication that I have told you in the previous slide is like blockade of the shunt, infection, and the over drainage. These are the common symptoms that you have to remember at your MLA. Thank you. तारिक साहब,
यस सर।
ये चैट को ओपन कर दें, फिर इनसे अगर इनको कोई पूछना हो तो पूछ लें।
हाँ ठीक है सर, मैं चैट ऑन कर। यस सर, चैट ऑन कर दिया सर।
Students, can you listen to me?
Yes sir.
Is there any question? Do we have any questions? कोई पूछना चाह रहे हैं कुछ सवाल? जी तारिक साहब।
जी सर।
कोई है स्टूडेंट जो पूछना चाह रहे हो?
सर किसी का मैसेज नहीं आया अभी चैट में।
मैं चैट करके मोर में जाऊँ ना?
सर कर दिया ऑन चेक।
कर दिए ना?
जी जी।
ये क्या कुछ लिखा हुआ आ रहा है क्या ये?
नहीं सर, किसी का कोई मैसेज नहीं है।
ये कोई सवाल को लिखा हुआ आ रहा है?
सर आपको करा होगा प्राइवेट में फिर मैसेज में।
हाँ, वो प्राइवेटली में आ रहा है, तो अब क्या करें उसके लिए?
सर हमारे
If a
पास
person-
नहीं है।
हाँ, वो मैसेज करना होगा ना, टाइप
जी
कर दूँ ना
सर।
मैं?
जी जी जी
हाँ?
रिप्लाई। जी जी सर, आप जवाब दे दें इनको, टाइप करके दे दें या उसको दे दें।
क्या करूँ, उसको बस क्लिक कर दूँगे?
जी सर, आप माइक पे भी दे सकते हैं आंसर, इसका कोई मसला नहीं है कि चैट बॉक्स में दे।
ये अपना ये मिस रमशा, सुन रही हैं आप मुझे? मुझे आवाज़ नहीं आ रही इनकी।
सर इनका सिर्फ चैट बॉक्स में वो यस कर सकती हैं, वो जवाब नहीं देंगे। म्यूट हुआ है सब बच्चों।
अच्छा, सब बच्चे म्यूट हो गए। इसको मैं क्या करूँ फिर आगे? इसको मैं इसको मैंने टाइप तो कर दिया, अब क्या करना है मुझे आगे? टाइप कर चुका हूँ मैं, इसको
जी जी
फॉरवर्ड कैसे?
सर इंटर कर देना, चले जाएगा मैसेज।
अच्छा, एंटर दबा दूँ?
जी जी
ये फिर एंटर कर दूँ, एंटर कर दूँ।
हेलो हेलो हम्म,
मेरा यार कौन है इनको बुलाए? यार ये एंटर कैसे होगा ये बताओ? ये कैसे होगा? ये जो सवाल पूछे इसको जवाब कैसे आगे जाएंगे?
सर आप, मैंने आपको बोला था ना, चले एंटर कर दें हम फिलहाल। आपका
कैसे
टाइप
एंटर
कर दिया,
होगा?
चलेगा?
चलेगी आपके?
जी। आप सर स्टूडेंट से, मतलब ये जो आ रहे हैं ना चैट के
हाँ।
जरिए, आपका क्वेश्चन पढ़िए, बाय वॉइस के जरिए जवाब दीजिए।
बाय?
बाय वॉइस के जरिए बोल के जवाब दीजिए आप।
चलो एक मिनट खड़े हो, एक बता देना क्या करना इसको, इसमें जवाब देना इसका।
इनका आप स्टूडेंट का नाम लेकर आप जो है जवाब दीजिए।
इससे पहले जाऊँ उसमें?
नहीं नहीं, स्टूडेंट का नाम पढ़िए,
हाँ,
पर स्टूडेंट का नाम पढ़ के आपका जवाब दीजिए चैट के जरिए, सॉरी बाय वॉइस के जरिए।
अभी वॉइस जारी होगी?
जी जी, माइक ऑन है ना आपका?
हाँ, ठीक है।
जी सर, माइक ऑन है।
Miss Hira Iqbal, most common shunt complication I have told you is shunt infection, and once there is infection, you have to remove the VP shunt completely. Miss Ramsha, I have told you that frontal lobe meningioma. It is treated by means of surgery. Surgery is the, treatment of choice. And The temporizing, the steroids, mannitol, these all are temporizing measure, just to reduce the intracranial pressure. Uzair Iqbal. Basal cistern and prepontine cistern is also a part of CT scan and MRI criteria. I mean, it depends. If, for example, the basal cisterns are obliterated, it means, or prepontine cistern is obliterated, it means that there is raised intracranial pressure, and it could be because of any tumor which is causing mass effect. It can be one of the criteria to pick up the hydrocephalus, but this criteria of cisterns obliteration is particularly common for the brain tumors. Miss Rabia Aziz, there will be papilledema in case of non-communicating hydrocephalus, whether it is non-communicating or communicating. If there is raised intracranial pressure because of any cause of the hydrocephalus, if there is raised intracranial pressure, and if the age group is more than 1 year, there will be papilledema.